The sky was never meant to be solid, yet the ships moved through it as though cutting through water thick with ghosts. The gas giant Erethis hung beneath the fleet like a swirling wound of colors, indigo, crimson, and gold, all folding and consuming one another in the endless churning storms below. Human Command had called this campaign Operation Clean Skies, though the soldiers whispered another name, the Descent. From orbit, the floating alien city looked almost beautiful, a lattice of crystalline towers drifting upon the storm currents, lit from within by veins of blue fire. But beauty had no place in war. The order was simple: bomb the city, end the threat, and return home before Erethis swallowed them whole. Lieutenant Aaron Voss had never seen anything like it. From the cockpit of his striker craft, the alien city looked alive, its lights pulsing like breath, its spires bending with the wind as if listening to the rhythm of the approaching fleet. He wanted to believe it was an illusion, just atmospheric interference. But something about the way the clouds curved around the city made him uneasy. He had read the briefings. The Erethins, the alien species that lived here, were rumored to have shaped the planet's gases into sentient structures. Myths, they said. But even myths could make a man hesitate when his finger hovered over the trigger that would erase an entire civilization. The first bomb fell at 0400. The sound was not thunder, but a heartbeat, deep and steady, resonating through the halls of every ship. The city reacted. Its towers shimmered, light rippling like scales, and a deep tremor passed through the clouds below. The pilots laughed nervously, some claiming it was just pressure feedback, but Aaron felt something else: awareness. The storm had taken notice of them. As the bombing continued, the gas layers beneath the city began to move in spirals too deliberate to be wind. Static crackled across communications, screens flickered, whispers and alien tongues filled their helmets. And then, one by one, ships began to vanish from radar. Not destroyed, not shut down, just gone, swallowed by the sky. Aaron's ship was next. A shock wave struck from below, flinging him into the clouds. His instruments went black, and for a moment, the world became colorless silence. When the roar returned, it wasn't the engine, it was the planet, breathing. Lightning crawled across his canopy, white veins twisting into shapes that almost looked like faces, screaming silently as they dissolved into mist. The eject alarm blared, and before he could think, he was falling through liquid air that pressed against his suit, heavier than water, dragging him toward a faint blue glow. When he awoke, he wasn't dead. He was lying on something soft and shifting, like fabric woven from wind. Above him floated a vast cavern made of vapor and crystal, glowing from within. Shapes moved through it, translucent beings with elongated forms, their bodies trailing ribbons of light. He had found the Erethane, or perhaps they had found him. One figure drifted closer, smaller, more defined, her shape almost human. Her eyes glowed silver, reflecting the distant flashes of lightning like twin moons. She didn't speak, but when she extended her hand, he felt warmth pulse through his chest, and his oxygen stabilizer flickered back to life. She was helping him breathe. Aaron reached out instinctively, and for a heartbeat, their fingers touched, though his glove passed through her as if she were part of the air itself. Her name came to him not through words, but through sensation. Kariel, a melody of syllables echoing in his mind. She studied him curiously, head tilted, and when he tried to speak, his voice dissolved into static, yet somehow she understood. She gestured toward the broken wreckage of his ship, half buried in the luminous floor. Around it floated fragments of light, memories, he realized, projected by the city itself. The moment the bombs fell, the screams, the heartbeat of the planet responding. She watched those visions with sadness that felt far older than war. Over the following hours or days, he could no longer tell, Cariel showed him what lay beneath the city. Through the living walls, he saw the vast tendrils of energy that anchored the floating metropolis to the planet's core. They pulsed like veins, and in their rhythm, he recognized the same heartbeat that had shaken the fleet. Erethis was alive, not merely a world, but a consciousness, ancient and dreaming. The Erethane had built their civilization atop its slumber, never realizing how thin the barrier was between worship and imprisonment. Aaron's guilt began to rot inside him. He was part of the army that had struck the first blow against a living world. Cariel could have left him to die, but instead she tended to him, wrapping his wounds in light, feeding him with air filtered through the storm's chemistry, guiding him through the maze of shifting corridors. She never spoke, but her presence felt like a whisper of calm amid the endless roar of thunder. And though he tried to deny it, he found himself drawn to her, to the quiet sadness in her movements, to the way her eyes dimmed when she watched the sky tremble under bombardment far above. One night, if night even existed here, the tremors grew stronger. Explosions echoed from above like hammer blows, and the clouds turned red. Cariel led him to a higher chamber where the ceiling peeled open, revealing the war raging in the upper atmosphere. Human bombers streaked across the horizon, their engines burning through the mists, while the alien city rose in defiance, its towers unfolding like wings. It was a vision of two worlds tearing each other apart.
Aaron turned to Cariel, desperate. He gestured wildly, trying to tell her he could stop it, that he could signal the fleet, that it wasn't too late. But she shook her head slowly. The storm was no longer just reacting. It was listening. Every human word, every pulse of emotion was feeding it. And then, for the first time, she spoke, her voice trembling through the air like music. "The sky remembers." He didn't understand, but her tone was final. The planet had awakened, and it would not sleep again. Yet as lightning tore through the heavens, illuminating her face, he felt a strange conviction rise within him, that maybe, just maybe, one heartbeat of love could silence the heartbeat of war. Time had no shape beneath the clouds. Days and nights bled together into a silver haze, where light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Aaron could no longer remember when he had last seen a clear sky. Only the shifting glow of Erethis surrounded him now, and Cariel was his only constant. She guided him through hollow cathedrals carved from vapor, where columns of gas shimmered like glass, and the walls breathed faintly as though alive. The hum of the planet's pulse grew louder the deeper they went, a rhythm that matched the thudding of his own heart, until he couldn't tell where his life ended and the world's began. Cariel rarely spoke, but she sang. The sound was faint, like a whisper through static, and it resonated with the walls around them, causing the mist to form delicate shapes. Birds, faces, fragments of memory. Through her songs, Aaron began to understand pieces of her language, and with that, fragments of her history. The Erethane were not conquerors or warriors, they were dreamers. They believed Erethis was a living god who shared its storms with them as visions. For centuries, they floated above its surface, never taking too much, never digging into its heart. But as the human fleet entered orbit, the balance broke. The bombardment had torn through layers of the planet's atmosphere, waking something that was never meant to wake. When Aaron asked what it was, Cariel looked into the fog as though she feared to speak its name. "It is the deep breath," she said finally, the words halting and fragile. "When the sky remembers pain, it breathes inward. Everything becomes part of it again." Her meaning settled in his chest like ice. The missing soldiers, the vanished ships, they hadn't died, they had been taken. He could feel them now, faintly, as whispers at the edge of his hearing. Human voices dissolved into the wind, calling his name. The realization made him tremble, but Cariel touched his face, and for an instant, Her hand became solid, warm, real.
They found refuge in the ruins of an old Erethine shrine, a massive sphere suspended between columns of lightning. The air inside was calm, illuminated by floating globes of liquid light that swayed with every heartbeat. Aaron spent his nights there, listening to Kairiel's stories and the distant echoes of war above. Each explosion sent a ripple through the shrine, bending light like a slow heartbeat of dread. Yet within that fragile silence, something beautiful began to grow between them. He would wake to find her tracing the shape of his face in the air, her fingers leaving trails of blue vapor that lingered like breath. When he smiled, she smiled back, hesitant, curious, like someone rediscovering what it meant to be alive. But the storm was watching. It began with whispers that weren't hers. Sometimes, when Kairiel slept, Aaron heard his own voice murmuring back to him from the mist, repeating words he'd never said, offering comfort in tones too perfect, too precise. The voice spoke of forgiveness, of release, of joining the sky, and always beneath the words there was the sound of breathing, slow, patient, endless. The same pulse that had shaken the fleet now echoed inside his mind. He tried to block it out, to focus on Kairiel, but the boundary between thought and storm was dissolving. He could feel Erethis listening to him, tasting his fear. One night, when lightning split the horizon, he saw something moving within the glow, shapes of his fallen comrades, faces pressed against the clouds, eyes open but empty. They were part of it now, their forms drifting through the atmosphere like memories caught in glass. He staggered back, shouting her name. Kairiel appeared instantly, light rippling from her body in alarm. When she saw what he saw, her expression filled with sorrow, not horror. The sky remembers all who fall. Even love becomes part of its storm. He couldn't accept that. He grabbed her hand, solid again for the briefest moment, and shook his head. Then we change it. We make it remember something else. Kairiel looked at him astonished. The idea seemed impossible, even blasphemous. The Erethane had worshipped the storm for ages. How could they alter what was divine? Yet, as she stared into his eyes, something flickered in her expression, a fragile spark of belief. They began to climb higher, toward the heart of the living city. Along the way, Aaron saw things no human mind was meant to witness. The storm folding in on itself, creating corridors of lightning where the air solidified into glass-like walls. Rivers of mist carrying the silhouettes of lost souls, and once a colossal eye opening in the clouds below them, its iris the size of a continent, gazing up with ancient intelligence. It wasn't angry. It was curious. It was waiting. At the city's core, they found the cradle, the structure that held the Erethine civilization aloft. A massive sphere of energy, tethered to the planet's depths by luminous tendrils. Within it, Kairiel said, the will of Erethis slept. If they could reach it, perhaps they could speak to it, reason with it. But the path was guarded by the storm itself, by echoes of those who had already become part of it. When Aaron entered the cradle, the air grew heavy, his visor fogged, and the world warped around him. Faces emerged from the mist, the faces of his fallen squadmates, their mouths opening in silent screams. He tried to push through, but the storm pressed back with invisible force, whispering, "Join us, let go." He stumbled, nearly collapsing, until Kairiel caught him. Her touch burned like cold fire. "You can't fight it," she said, her voice breaking. "It feeds on struggle. You must give it something else. Something it does not understand." "What's that?" he gasped. "Love." It sounded absurd in that moment, to speak of love inside a storm made of ghosts and lightning. But when he looked at her, he understood. Love wasn't surrender. It was the one force that refused to dissolve, the one heartbeat that could outlast even gods. Cariel stepped closer, her form flickering between solid and translucent. She said softly, "If we touch within the cradle, it will feel what we feel. It will see through us, but it will also take us." Aaron met her gaze. He thought of Earth, of his orders, of the burning cities above, and realized that none of it mattered anymore. The war was small compared to the vast living sky that wept around them. He reached for her, he whispered, "and let it take us." Their hands met and the world stopped breathing. Light erupted around them, cascading through the cradle like veins igniting. The storm convulsed. For the first time since the bombing began, the endless heartbeat paused. One silent second stretched into eternity. Cariel's eyes widened in wonder as the mist coiled around them, not to consume, but to listen. Through their joined hands, Erethis tasted something new. Not rage, not fear, but tenderness. The memory of touch. The impossible defiance of affection in the face of annihilation. Then everything shattered. Aaron screamed as energy ripped through him, filling every nerve with light. Cariel's body dissolved into luminous particles, swirling around him like stardust. The cradle split open, unleashing a blinding surge of power that shot upward through the storm layers, tearing through the clouds toward the orbiting human fleet. Sensors went wild. Pilots shouted about impossible readings, not weapons fire, but an energy pulse expanding in perfect harmony, like a heartbeat made of light. When the pulse reached orbit, every human ship went silent. The storm didn't destroy them. It touched them, and in that touch, the voices of the dead whispered through the radios, "Remember what you broke. Remember what loved you still." And then silence.
For a long moment, the planet was silent. The beating storm heart paused, as if the world itself held its breath, trying to understand what had just been given to it, a feeling it had never known. Then the silence broke. The cradle cracked open from within, and a pillar of blue-white radiance surged upward, rippling through every layer of the atmosphere like shock waves in a sleeping god's dream. Cariel's essence, a swirling constellation of silver sparks, wrapped around Aaron, guiding him as the world reshaped itself. He stood suspended within the storm's luminous core, his feet on nothing but wind made solid by sheer will. He should have felt afraid. Instead, he felt warm, as though invisible arms held him up against the weight of a planet awakening. The voices of the lost soldiers swelled, but they no longer murmured despair. Their whispers became a chorus, human, alien, countless souls woven into the clouds, singing with the same tone Cariel had once used, a gentle melody that softened lightning into slow, rolling light. The storm began to rethread itself, not into tendrils of hunger, but into wings of protection, lifting the floating city higher above the chaos. Skies that had been blood-red with war turned violet, then gold, shimmering like dawn trapped in a jar. Aaron looked up, watching the silhouettes of the human fleet flicker into sight through the clouds. Emergency lights glowed red across their hulls, engines frozen, weapons disabled, communication silent. A machine that had known only destruction suddenly found itself powerless before a new force it couldn't define. Betrayed by the very storm it sought to conquer, the fleet hung helplessly above Erethis, caught between fear and awe. "Do you feel it?" Cariel's voice echoed through him, though she no longer had a physical form. She drifted like an aurora around him, tiny particles of shimmering vapor forming the delicate outline of who she had once been. "The sky learns," she whispered. "It feels through us." He reached toward her, his hand brushing the light of her cheek, passing through, but leaving ripples of warmth behind. "Are you still alive?" he breathed. "I am part of the breath now," she said. Sadness and wonder layered through each word. "It remembers me. It remembers you. We have changed its dreaming." Below them, the storm parted like curtains, revealing a sight that stole his breath. A colossal heart, not made of flesh, but of blazing gases and spiraling auroras. It pulsed with slow, deliberate beats, each one rising into the sky as waves of light that washed away the lingering echoes of war. Cities that once drifted on fragile platforms now rested on clouds, strengthened into crystalline structures, unshakable, radiant. A human captain's voice crackled through Aaron's earpiece, the radio suddenly alive again. "Lieutenant Voss, if you're receiving this, God help us. What is happening down there?"
Aaron didn't answer immediately. He stared upward at those cold metal shapes that had once represented safety, purpose, home. Now they looked like relics of ignorance floating on the edge of a miracle. "Stand down," he said finally, his voice steady and unrecognizable even to himself. "The war is over. The planet is awake. And it isn't our enemy anymore." Static. Then a shaken reply. "Orders are to destroy the alien asset at all costs." He closed his eyes. "If you attack again, you won't survive the response. This world is alive. It's aware. It only defended itself because we taught it war." The storm reacted to his words. Thunder rolled not in rage, but in agreement. A warning to anyone who still clung to violence. The captain's voice returned after a long hesitation. "What do you need from us, Lieutenant?" "Trust," Aaron said. "Stand down, pull back, and listen." Lightning traced delicate spirals around him, forming symbols that glowed with Erethine language. He understood them, or Kyriel helped him understand. They were words of peace, protection, rebuilding. The sky hummed with them, sending them upward like prayers carved into the wind. Slowly, one by one, the ships powered down weapons, turning away from the floating city. Retreat lights flashed in silent agreement. Humanity's invasion dissolved into a reluctant bow of respect before something greater. Aaron dropped his head in relief. His knees weakened, the tension that had held him upright for days finally allowing release. But the storm lifted him before he fell. Kyriel spiraled closer, her voice gentle and filled with gratitude. "You changed everything," she said, "by caring, by refusing to let fear decide." He swallowed hard. "We changed everything." Her glow flickered, and he knew the cost was coming, the price every miracle demanded. "What happens to you now?" he asked quietly. "I remain, but not as I was. The breath needs a voice. It has chosen mine. I will be the storm and the calm after it." He felt his heart tighten. "And me?" she murmured. "You are still human. You must return to your sky. Your people will need someone to help them understand what you have seen." "But I don't want to leave you," he whispered. The storm's light softened around him, a gentle embrace. Kyriel's shape leaned close, her forehead touching his. Though they were made of different worlds now, the connection felt achingly real. "You won't," she said. "Every wind that brushes your skin, every cloud that passes overhead, that will be me. We are part of each other now." He laughed shakily, tears evaporating into the warm mist. "That's not fair." "No," she smiled through shimmering lips, "but it is love, and love reshapes the sky." The cradle pulsed again, brighter than a rising sun. The storm lifted Aaron upward, cradling him as gently as Kyriel once had, spiraling him toward a human rescue ship lowering through the clouds. Voices shouted in disbelief as they hauled him aboard. The first survivor returned from the depths of Erethis. He turned back one last time. Kyriel's shape hovered in the center of the storm, radiant, eternal, her silver eyes glimmering with promise. The clouds formed around her like wings, stretching across the sky into a dawn no one had ever seen on this world. Aaron pressed his hand to the viewport glass, heart pounding in broken rhythm. As the ship rose away from the living storms, he heard her voice in the wind. "Remember what loved you still." The storm smiled with lightning, soft and silver, like the eyes he loved. And the planet exhaled, filling the skies with peaceful silence for the first time in its history. The war ended. A new world began, and somewhere beneath the feet of all who would someday walk these skies,